And that brings me to my next speaker, and what an incredible woman she is. And just like Saida and Ruby, Naazi is one of my beginning facilitators. Again, she's been on the journey with me since 2021, oozing with determination, and has a story of her own. And actually, again, was in one of my programs specifically. So I've had the pleasure of watching her journey from there to here. And to be honest, Naazi has grown in so many ways. It would take too long for me to share it, and I'd take up your whole entire summit just sharing how much she's grown and what she's done. But what I am proud to say, and what I'm proud to see, is how she has literally turned her scar into a story. Now she's helping you to rewrite your story. But more beautifully, she's been able to gain qualification and education, certificates. And so not only has she grown through her scars of her trauma, she's grown in her career because of her trauma. So without further ado, Naazi, it's over to you.
Yeah, thank you for such a lovely, wonderful introduction. I feel so special. And thank you for organizing this summit. And thank you for all those who are attending tonight. And I feel very honored to be speaking here to all of you tonight and sharing a bit of my story of how I actually reached here. So I'm just going to dive right down into it now. So I moved to Pakistan, Lahore, back in 2000, and I raised my children there for 18 years. So for 18 years, I lived in Pakistan. My husband was still working in the UK and was traveling back and forth. And I was living in a very large family, which was challenging at times, but overall, my experience was a positive one. Towards the end of 2017, my daughter became very ill, and it was a very worrying and stressful period. But Alhamdulillah, she got the right treatment and was on the road to recovery. And although I was dealing with a lot on my own, I felt like I was in control and I had it all together. And, being strong was my superpower. And I was always known to be resilient and strong and, strong enough to deal with anything on my own. And I didn't really need any support or any help. And, I wore that cape very proudly. I was very proud of that. So in 2018, in 2018, I started feeling very overwhelmed and very exhausted. Every time someone would call my name, my heart would start racing. If my kids called out to me, if anyone just said mum or they called out my name, my heart would start racing and I would like feel like something bad's about to happen. Um, I constantly felt like, something was about to happen. I was always like, hyper alert, looking out for danger. Um, and when I went out, God, like talking about this is like, it really kind of like brings it back up in your body, doesn't it? Although it's been years. Um, when I used to go out, I used to feel like I was being followed. And I even started getting paranoid that I would be shot in the back. Um, it was it was really scary and it was really confusing. And it wasn't something that I could explain to anyone either. Because explaining something like that, like when I go out, I feel like someone's gonna, you know, kill me or someone's after me. They're just gonna think, oh my God, what's wrong with you? And I don't have any answer for it. Like, I don't know how. And especially in Pakistan, like, where people jump to all sorts of conclusions about you if you say anything like that. At one point, I even thought someone had done black magic on me because it was really hard to explain how I was feeling and more so why I was feeling like I couldn't understand because I was like strong and I had everything together. I didn't feel like I'd gone through anything. So it was very confusing. But at that time, when I was going through this, it was the little things that would really start me off. I would start crying. I remember once my husband bought a loaf of bread, and I just started crying. I started bawling my eyes out. I was like, "This is not enough for the kids." And I felt like, my kids were gonna, die of hunger or something. Like there was so much going through me. Once somebody came and because we were living in a large, like extended family, and someone came up to borrow my iron, and I was giving it to her, but then I started crying. I was like, I need it back in one piece. You have to give it back to me. And it was like a kid. I was like a kid. And I just couldn't understand it. Nobody else could understand it. It was, it was very, very confusing. And I had outbursts of rage over any small disagreements, and these were usually targeted at my husband. Like the rage was always focused on him, and this was all out of character. Like, for me, it just wasn't me at all. Nobody knew how to deal with me, and everyone started to avoid me in case something, set me off, including my husband, who was like very worried and very scared for me. But nobody knew how to deal with me. They knew that it was because the stress I had gone through with my daughter's illness. But then that was about it. And I didn't know, they didn't know. So I began to feel very like, isolated and very confused. I went to see a psychiatrist who prescribed sleeping pills and relaxants. But there was no answers. Like I went and told him how I was feeling, and he couldn't really explain what was happening. And he said you just need to relax and sleep more, and you'll be feeling better. Um, so by now, I think I had just become emotionally numb. My turning point was, I think, it was just one day I was lying in my bed and I was totally numb, and I was lying there looking up at the ceiling, and I heard someone open my bedroom door and kind of like, take a peek at what I was doing or what state I was in. Was I laughing? Was I crying? Um, they just came in, took a peek, and they saw me just lying there, and they closed the door and they left. And I think it's probably one of my kids who just come to check up and see if mum's okay. And this is what my life had become. Like everyone was just tiptoeing around me, and I think it was in that moment that I decided that this is not how I want to live. I don't want to be dependent on medication and, not even knowing what's wrong with me. I quickly became known as someone with mental health issues. Like word had got around, and there's something wrong with her mentally, and I think she's taken like, she was stressed because of her daughter, and but it wasn't in a very kind of like a compassionate way, because in Pakistan, women having mental health issues is kind of interpreted as someone who's either had black magic done on them, is in an abusive relationship with the husband or the in-laws, or the husband is having affairs because she's not a good enough wife. So there's a lot of, shame and stigma attached to, you know, that kind of like label of having mental health issues. Um, so that summer, I was coming back to the UK, 2018. So, after 18 years, I was moving back. And I was moved back and I thought, I feel better. It's going to be a fresh start. And, I came back, but nothing kind of like changed internally. I felt much more isolated. I moved to a new town, so not where I'd grown up. So I was in a new town. I didn't know anyone. And then, I just became more isolated, and I eventually like felt too scared to leave the house. And this continued for a year until finally in 2019, I plucked up the courage to see my GP and explain how I felt. And honestly, it was just so hard going to the GP because I didn't know what I was going to say and I didn't want to come across as crazy because that's how I felt. Like what I felt was very, very real. And but I couldn't explain it. And I was feeling the same way that I was feeling while I was in Pakistan. So that was really kind of like it was very scary and very confusing. But when I went to the GP and she asked a lot of questions and I told her everything that had happened. And then she diagnosed me with PTSD. And I wasn't really sure what that meant. Um, but I was just so relieved to finally have a name to what I was feeling. It was such a relief. Um, I was then put on a 9-month waiting list for therapy. But 9 months, no way, I was not going to wait around that long, especially now that I knew what I was dealing with or what I had and had been diagnosed with. So I was like, I can't wait around for 9 months. I did my research and I found Mayameen and I found her 7-week trauma recovery course. And it was like a godsend. I just signed up there and then on the spot. So when I signed up and when I started, I think it was in November 2019. That was when I started. And I'm not kidding when I say this, but in the first session of the course, everything that I had been silently suffering from, was there in writing, and it all began to make sense. And it was like, the clouds have parted, and it's like light coming through, and it was like light coming through. I was so relieved that I wasn't going mad because that's how I felt. And I just felt totally broken and beyond repair. I was like, I can't get better now. Like, look at me, look at what age I'm in, and, there's no hope. Um, so on the course, I remember Maymin when we did the cluster symptoms. And one of the cluster symptoms was uh, hypervigilance, right? Because your body's in survival mode and your brain's looking out for danger. And this kind of really explained why I felt unsafe when I'd go out, and I felt like I was being followed or something bad was going to happen. So once I understood that, I was like, oh God, thank God, like this is what it is. Um, Another cluster symptom was anger, and that explained the rage. And anger, I was a very angry person, so anger was one of my main coping mechanisms. Um, and with this course, I learned so much about myself and how much emotion I had suppressed in my body since childhood. So this didn't start in 2017 when my daughter was ill. Like I had thought that that was the cause of whatever was happening. Um, but it was, this had all been suppressed in my body since childhood. And it's like an invisible rucksack that you carry around with you full of suppressed, emotions like, anger, fear, sadness, guilt, and shame. And then you finally learn how to release and acknowledge them and release them in a safe space. So literally, when I say that this course, it transformed my life, like there's so much more to it, but I would take all night just talking about this. And it really did transform my life. And I really want to thank you, Mayameen, for creating this course and helping me become the person that I am today. I'm honored to be a facilitator and help women navigate their way through PTSD in a safe environment. And I've had, ever since I've become a facilitator, I've had amazing feedback and testimonials from clients who have been in all ages, from like their 20s to their mid 50s, who've completed the course. I've delivered this course in Urdu, Punjabi, as well as English, and I've had clients from different parts of the world, including Australia, Maldives, Dubai, Pakistan. and it's gone global. It's definitely gone global. Um, and I just like to say to everyone who's listening that it is never too late to get help and heal. It's never too late. I was in my mid 40s when this started, and I'm going to be 50 in December. And I honestly feel like my life has just started. Um, it literally feels like I've been given a new lease of life since becoming a facilitator, or since doing your course actually, and actually like kind of like understanding what's been happening all my life. I then went on to become a narcissistic abuse specialist, and then a pre-practitioner, brain spotting practitioner. I can't remember what else, but there's so many things that have, I've gone on to do. And this is from someone who I had so much, self-esteem issues and confidence, because when I was younger, like for some reason, which I wouldn't be able to explain now, but I was taken out of school when just after I'd done I think the 12 plus was it. So I didn't go to secondary school, and I was literally taken off the radar, taken to Pakistan for a whole year. And when I came back, that's it, and I was told that, oh, you need to stay at home because, your mum's ill and everything. But it wasn't that. There was other reasons behind it. And I can now understand why, my father made that decision. But at that time, it just totally kind of like, it just closed me in. And now looking back, when I see like, because I always used to think, I don't have any qualifications and I can't say, I can't do anything and I'm not good enough. And after doing your course, and it just sort of like, I think that was just like, that was so transformational for me. It just like opened up so many avenues and doors for me, like, because I had a passion for helping women, maybe just like you do. And I really wanted to help women. And I think I've always wanted to do that, but I think God had plans for me where He had to totally break me and then remake me, and, to become who I've become today. And I do feel like now that I'm actually living and not existing,
Mm.
because I was never in the present moment. I think I was always in a dissociated state in my life. And that's one of the cluster symptoms as well, in a dissociated state where I couldn't, like, I was just like a totally different person. I couldn't feel anything. And, not feeling happiness and not feeling sadness and grief, and like shutting myself off from that. I was shutting off myself to, the positive emotions as well. And looking back, I'm thinking like, I've gone through this, I've had it all my life and I didn't know. I had anxiety all my life and I didn't know, because it was just, for me, I never knew anything else. And so that's why up until the point where I had the breakdown, I didn't think there was anything wrong. I just thought this is how people are, or this is how, people live. Or maybe everyone feels like that on the inside. And on the outside, I was a very kind of like, I was a very confident person. But in the inside, it was a totally different story. So, yeah, so coming out of that, and, just now I can like really just be myself and be who I am. And I always have this, like, I always pray that, please God, don't take me away now, because I've only just started to live and I want to help more people. I want to help more women. And I always pray that, Allah doesn't take me just right now. Just give me a few more years. Let me do some more work. Yeah, so that was my story.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
listening,
Well,
everyone.
round of applause, everyone, for Naazi. You've certainly brought some tears to my eyes this evening, because you you're still, like you say, you're on that journey, and now you're just starting it, and now you're just writing your story, and your chapters are ones of past. But do you know what, Nazi, as you said, you've come so far, so far. And you know what, you've just shared so vulnerably as well. So thank you so much, because you're right. It's always taboo, but let alone in cultures and, in villages, like you say, where mental health, what's wrong with you, and why are you in bed all day, and why don't you just move, and why don't you just be grateful, and why don't you just do this, and like you say, it was just so
Yeah,
normal. What do you
yeah. I
can't
think,
know what you don't
the
know.
way the bit that you say about being grateful, because when I was living there, and if I kind of mentioned to someone that I just don't feel any happiness, or I don't feel any joy, or I just feel really dead inside, and they would say to me that you've got an amazing husband, your kids go to the best schools in Lahore, you've got driver, you've got cook, you've got maid, and you're
What?
feeling like that. So there was a lot of shame attached to that. Like, I should be grateful. And I just felt like such an ungrateful cow. And they just sent me into some, like, deeper kind of shame. And I couldn't say anything. I couldn't explain. So, the symptoms of PTSD are so unexplainable.
Yes.
They're,
Yeah.
they're very hard to explain. And it's not like I was in a depressed state. I'd be doing everything normally. I was the life and soul of the party. So everyone saw me as, this confident woman who's raising her kids in Lahore, come from
Mm,
England,
mm,
and
mm,
so strong, and her husband's like back and forth. So he wasn't with me constantly, but I was just managing things on my own. But inside it was just such a different story. I was a totally different person. And it's a very confusing state to be.
yeah.
It's a
Yeah.
very confusing state to be. And I remember just being miserable and irritable and angry. And, then it finally just, like, I just became emotionally numb.
Yeah.
And I remember
And
my
that's it,
brother
isn't it? It's
coming
those
home.
different states, and that is what
Yeah.
makes it so complicated. And you know what, to get that diagnosis is so difficult, as we know as well. So people are just like walking around like really confused and not knowing, like you say, is it depression? Is it anxiety? What is it? And it's what we say, if you don't know, or what do you know, Um, no, thank you so much, Nazi. I mean, the journey has just been incredible. I mean, and then when you say like 2019, I'm like, wow, it feels like forever ago. But you've just come through such a long journey, and you are a powerhouse, as the chat's going wild for you, as so it should. Is You've achieved amazing things, and I'm glad you touched upon the education side of it as well, because, like you say, that's opened the door to you to be able to progress and to find your niche and your specialism, and to be able to, the fact that you can even speak so many different languages is an inspiration in itself, because
Mhm.
us English, like myself, we're a little bit lazy, speaking for myself personally, and language isn't even a thing. But you know what, you've achieved so much, and like you said, you're at an age, where people will be thinking, oh, it's time for me to settle down now, and I just put up with my ways and my thinking and my thoughts and my behaviors. But actually, like you said, it's about rewriting that story anytime. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, Nazi. I mean,
Thank you, Mama.
you're a
Thank
woman
you.
of many words, and I'm just so honoured and proud to have you. And I'm so glad to see you shine as much as you deserve, and hopefully many more shining to be done in the next couple of months, when we're going to start getting us all out there and getting you ladies all visible, because you deserve to be known. So thank you so much, Nazi.
Looking forward
Thank
to
you.
it. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for listening.